A drill sergeant spent weeks bullying me for being weak, not knowing I was an undercover JAG officer investigating his conduct. Sergeant Terrence singled me out from the first day of basic training. I stepped off the bus at Fort Benning with 20 other recruits. The Georgia heat hit me like a wall. My cover story was simple, just another law school dropout looking for structure and purpose in the military. Captain Delaney had briefed me thoroughly the day before. I wasn't actually a new recruit. I was a JAG officer, investigating reports of misconduct and abuse by certain drill instructors. Your job is to document everything, he had said. We need solid evidence before we can take action. The captain had shown me files of previous complaints, all dismissed due to lack of evidence or witnesses suddenly recanting. Something wasn't right at Fort Benning. We lined up in formation as 3 drill sergeants emerged from the administrative building. One of them, a tall man with a permanent scowl, walked slowly down our line. I am Sergeant Terrence, he barked, and I already hate each and every one of you. He stopped directly in front of me. His eyes narrowed as he studied my face. You look like trouble, he said. What's your name, recruit? I gave him the name from my cover identity. He smirked like he knew something I didn't. Drop and give me 50, he ordered. The rest of you maggots, stand at attention. I hit the ground and started doing push-ups. The concrete scraped my palms as I counted aloud. Terrence stood over me the entire time. The other recruits remained frozen in formation. Faster, he shouted. My grandmother moves quicker than you. By the time I finished, my arms were shaking. The other recruits had been allowed to rest while I continued. During chow, a thin recruit named Caleb leaned over. He's got it out for you already, he whispered. Terrence has a reputation for breaking people. 3 guys quit last month because of him. I nodded but said nothing. This was exactly the kind of information I needed to document. That afternoon, Terrence assigned us to clean our equipment. I finished quickly, making sure everything was spotless. Terrence inspected my work and frowned. Not good enough, he said, dumping everything onto the floor. Do it again. I cleaned everything a second time. He dumped it again. This happened 4 more times while the other recruits finished their tasks and moved on. By the time he finally approved my work, it was nearly dark. In the barracks that night, a stocky recruit named Owen approached my bunk. You should report him, he suggested. What he's doing isn't right. Another recruit, Trevor, overheard and shook his head. Bad idea, he warned. The last guy who complained got it 10 times worse. I noticed the other recruits giving me a wide berth. No one wanted Terrence's attention to spill over onto them. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep. I pulled out a small notebook and began documenting the day's events in a code Captain Delaney and I had developed. 3 days later, I met Captain Delaney at the designated location off base, a coffee shop 20 minutes from Fort Benning. It's not enough, he said after reviewing my notes. We need more concrete evidence of misconduct. Singling out one recruit for extra push-ups isn't going to convince command. I explained how Terrence had made me clean already spotless equipment 6 times, how he screamed in my face while other recruits watched. Keep documenting everything, Captain Delaney insisted. We need a pattern of behavior that can't be explained away as tough training. I returned to base feeling frustrated. The captain didn't seem to understand how quickly things were escalating. The next morning, Terrence was waiting for me. You look tired, recruit, he said with a smirk. Maybe you were up late doing something you shouldn't? I maintained my composure. His comment made me wonder if he suspected something. Terrence made me run extra laps that day. He claimed my form was wrong during drills and made me repeat them until long after everyone else had finished. During the second week, I noticed him watching me with increasing suspicion. He started asking questions about my background. Law school dropout, huh? He said during an inspection. Seems like you're still asking too many questions for someone who's supposed to follow orders. I kept my head down and continued documenting everything. Each night, I added to my coded journal. By the end of the second week, most recruits avoided me completely. Only Trevor occasionally offered words of encouragement when Terrence wasn't around. Captain Delaney seemed more interested during our second meeting. He's escalating faster than we expected, he said. This fits the pattern from previous complaints. I handed over my journal entries. He's writing me up for infractions that others commit without consequences, I explained. Yesterday he claimed I was secretly taking notes during instruction. The captain nodded. We need more, he said, but you're making progress. Be careful. If he suspects you're gathering evidence, things could get dangerous. I returned to base with a renewed sense of purpose. My mission was clear: document Terrence's abuse until we had enough evidence to stop him permanently. What I didn't know then was how quickly things would escalate, or how dangerous Sergeant Terrence would become once he started to suspect who I really was. The morning after my meeting with Captain Delaney, Sergeant Terrence cornered me during breakfast. His eyes narrowed as he leaned close to my face. You ask too many questions, recruit, he hissed. I don't like curious people. I kept my expression neutral. I hadn't actually asked any unusual questions, which made his accusation even more suspicious. Trevor, who was sitting across from me, spoke up. He barely talks, Sergeant. He's just trying to learn the procedures. Terrence's head snapped toward Trevor. His face darkened with rage. Did I ask for your input? He shouted. Drop and give me 50. Both of you. Now! We hit the floor immediately. The other recruits stared at their trays, avoiding eye contact. After we finished, Terrence made Trevor run extra laps around the training field. I watched helplessly as my only ally was punished for defending me. During the third week, Terrence's behavior took an even stranger turn. He started making comments about my background that weren't in my paperwork. Law school dropout, he said during an inspection. Couldn't handle the pressure, could you? Always looking for shortcuts. I maintained my cover story. His knowledge of my supposed past was concerning. Later that week, he cornered me after a training exercise. No other recruits were within earshot. I know your type, he said quietly. You'll stab your superiors in the back first chance you get. His words sent a chill through me. It sounded like he knew something about my real purpose. I needed better evidence. During my next meeting with Captain Delaney, I explained the escalation. He's becoming more aggressive, I reported, and he seems to know things about me that aren't in my cover file. The captain frowned. That's concerning. We need to accelerate the investigation. He introduced me to Faith, a JAG administrative assistant. She provided me with a recording device disguised as a standard issue watch. Be extremely careful, she warned. This isn't just about documenting abuse anymore. If he's investigating you, things could get dangerous. I returned to base with the hidden device. The timing was perfect because Terrence immediately isolated me during field exercises the next day. You're on perimeter duty, he ordered while assigning everyone else to team activities, alone. I spent 6 hours patrolling the training area's outer boundary by myself. When I returned, the other recruits were already eating dinner. Julian, a quiet recruit who rarely spoke, approached me in the chow line. He made you repeat the obstacle course 5 times after everyone left, he whispered. I saw it. I stayed behind to get my canteen. I nodded gratefully. Another witness was exactly what we needed. During week 5, things reached a breaking point. Terrence burst into the barracks during personal time. Everyone out except you, he shouted, pointing at me. The other recruits scrambled to leave. When we were alone, he stepped uncomfortably close. You recording our conversations? Recruit? My heart pounded. The recording device was on my wrist at that very moment. No, Sergeant, I answered calmly. That would be against regulations. He didn't believe me. He tore through my footlocker and personal items, scattering everything across the floor. I know what you're doing, he growled. I've seen your type before. He found nothing incriminating. The device remained undetected on my wrist. After destroying my sleeping area, he ordered me to rebuild it. Then he made me do it again and again. By the time he left, it was nearly midnight. The other recruits filed back in silently, avoiding eye contact. Trevor helped me straighten the last of my things. What was that about? He whispered. I shook my head. I have no idea. The next day, I met Captain Delaney at our usual location. I handed over the recording device with evidence of Terrence's escalating behavior. He's getting paranoid, I explained. He searched my belongings looking for recording devices. The captain reviewed the footage immediately. His expression grew more concerned with each passing minute. This is beyond simple training abuse, he said finally. The way he's targeting you, the things he's saying about your background, something else is going on. I agreed. He seems to think I'm gathering evidence against him, but he doesn't know I'm JAG. He thinks I'm just a troublemaking recruit. Captain Delaney nodded grimly. We need to move faster. His behavior is escalating too quickly. He handed me a new recording device, even smaller than the first. This one was disguised as a standard military button. Keep documenting everything, he instructed, but be extremely careful. If he's this paranoid already, there's no telling what he might do next. I returned to base with a growing sense of unease. Terrence wasn't just an abusive drill sergeant. Something deeper was happening, and I was getting closer to uncovering it. What I didn't expect was how quickly things would come to a head, or that Terrence would make a critical mistake that would expose everything. I woke up to shuffling noises coming from the barracks hallway. The digital clock read 12:17 a.m. Everyone else was asleep. I slipped out of bed silently and moved toward the sound. The button-sized recording device Faith had given me was attached to my undershirt. Sergeant Terrence stood in the hallway with his back to me. He was talking on his phone in a hushed voice. Yes, sir. I've been watching him closely, he whispered. Something's not right about this one. I pressed myself against the wall and activated the recording device. The documentation is all in order if anyone asks questions, Terrence continued. Everything will look legitimate. We've done this before. My heart pounded. This was exactly the kind of evidence we needed. I'll handle it, he said, just like the others. By the end of the week, he'll either quit or we'll have reason to remove him. Terrence ended the call and headed toward the exit. I slipped back to my bunk and pretended to be asleep. The next morning, I sent the recording to Captain Delaney through the secure channel we'd established. His response came back immediately. Stay alert. Backup coming. At morning formation, Terrence's entire demeanor had changed. He was calm, almost friendly toward the other recruits. When he reached me during inspection, he stopped. His voice was eerily quiet. I know what you're doing, he said, so only I could hear. People who cause problems have a way of disappearing around here. I maintained my composure. His threat was now recorded on the device. I've dealt with your type before, he continued. Nobody believes recruits who complain. They just get labeled as weak. I noticed Sergeant Quincy watching our exchange from across the field. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Terrence whispered. I've been here 8 years. Nobody questions my methods. The formation ended, and Terrence assigned everyone to their morning tasks. He put me on latrine duty alone. As I was leaving, I saw Sergeant Quincy approach Lieutenant Parker. They spoke briefly while glancing in my direction. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning bathrooms and wondering when Captain Delaney's promised backup would arrive. The recording device captured everything as I worked. Just before lunch, the barracks erupted with activity. Major Liana had arrived for an unscheduled inspection. The major was a stern woman with 20 years of service. Her presence sent the drill sergeants into a frenzy of preparation. All recruits, form up on the parade ground, Sergeant Quincy announced over the loudspeaker. I joined the others as they rushed to formation. Terrence intercepted me before I could reach the group. Not you, he said, grabbing my arm. You're needed for special detail. He steered me away from the formation toward the supply building. His grip was painfully tight. You think you're clever, he hissed. But I know what you're doing. You've been documenting everything, haven't you? I remained silent. We were now completely alone behind the supply building. Answer me, he shouted, shoving me against the wall. Who are you working for? I decided it was time. I think you should remove your hands, Sergeant. His eyes widened with rage. Are you threatening me, recruit? I'm not a recruit, I said calmly. I'm a JAG officer, investigating multiple complaints about your conduct. The color drained from his face. He released my arm immediately. That's impossible, he stammered. Your paperwork was part of my cover, I finished for him, and you've just provided all the evidence we needed. He lunged at me suddenly, grabbing for the recording device now visible on my shirt. I blocked his arm easily. Assaulting an officer, I said. That's another charge to add to the list. Major Leanna rounded the corner with Lieutenant Parker and Sergeant Quincy. Captain Delaney was with them. Sergeant Terrence, the major said coldly. Step away from that officer immediately. Terrence backed away, his face a mask of shock and rage. You've been under investigation for months, Captain Delaney explained. Multiple recruits filed complaints about your methods. They were weak, Terrence shouted. I was making them stronger. Major Leanna's expression hardened. By threatening them? By singling them out for abuse? It's called training, he protested. This is the military, not summer camp. Lieutenant Parker stepped forward. We have recordings of you threatening to make recruits disappear. That goes well beyond training. Sergeant Quincy looked disgusted. I reported my concerns weeks ago. The way you isolated certain recruits wasn't right. Terrence's eyes darted between them, looking for an ally and finding none. This isn't over, he said, pointing at me. You have no idea what's really happening here. 2 military police officers appeared behind the major. She nodded toward Terrence. Sergeant Terrence, you are relieved of duty pending investigation, she announced formally. These officers will escort you to processing. As the MPs led him away, he looked back at me with pure hatred. You'll regret this, he called. All of you will. Captain Delaney approached me as Terrence disappeared from view. Good work, he said quietly. We've got him. I nodded, feeling relief wash over me. There's more to this than just Terrence, I said. That phone call mentioned others involved. The captain's expression turned serious. I know. Colonel Renee is flying in tonight. We're expanding the investigation. Major Leanna joined us. Lieutenant Parker has some explaining to do about ignoring previous complaints, she said. This should have been addressed long ago. I removed the recording device and handed it to Captain Delaney. The evidence was secure. What about the other recruits? I asked, thinking of Trevor and Julian, who had witnessed so much. They'll be interviewed separately, the major assured me. Anyone who experienced or witnessed abuse will have their statements taken. As we walked back toward the administrative building, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and unease. We had stopped Terrence, but his final words bothered me. What did he mean by what's really happening here, and who else was involved in whatever scheme they'd been running? Those questions would have to wait for Colonel Renee's arrival. For now, at least Sergeant Terrence's reign of terror was over. Colonel Renee arrived the next morning. She strode into the conference room with purpose and authority. Captain Delaney and I stood at attention as she entered. At ease, she said, placing her briefcase on the table. Let's get to work. The colonel had 30 years of JOG experience. Her reputation for thoroughness was legendary throughout the Corps. I presented the complete evidence file we'd compiled. The recordings, journal entries, and witness statements formed a damning case against Sergeant Terrence. This is more extensive than I expected, Colonel Renee admitted, reviewing the materials. Well done, Lieutenant. Captain Delaney nodded in agreement. Our operative documented everything meticulously. Trevor and Julian arrived next for their interviews. They seemed nervous but determined. Sergeant Terrence forced him to clean already spotless equipment 6 times, Trevor testified. He singled him out from day one. Julian confirmed my account of the obstacle course incident. He made him repeat it 5 times after everyone else had finished. It wasn't training. It was harassment. Colonel Renee took detailed notes throughout their testimonies. Her expression remained neutral, but I could tell she was disturbed by what she heard. Sergeant Quincy's testimony proved particularly valuable. He had witnessed several incidents but had been unsure how to proceed. I reported my concerns to Lieutenant Parker 3 weeks ago, he admitted, but nothing happened. Lieutenant Parker was called in next. He looked uncomfortable as Colonel Renee questioned him directly. Why didn't you investigate these allegations when they were first brought to you? She asked. The lieutenant shifted in his seat. Terrence has been here 8 years. His methods get results. Results? Colonel Renee's voice was ice cold. We have evidence of threats, psychological abuse, and potentially criminal conduct. Lieutenant Parker stared at the table. I received complaints from 2 previous recruits. I dismissed them as inability to handle the rigors of training. Major Leanna slammed her hand on the table. That's completely unacceptable, Lieutenant. You enabled this behavior. The major turned to Colonel Renee. I want a full investigation into all training practices at Fort Benning. This stops now. Colonel Renee nodded. Agreed. Captain Delaney will oversee the expanded investigation. By afternoon, military police had formally charged Sergeant Terrence with multiple violations of military code. His phone had been seized and was being analyzed for evidence of other involved parties. I met with Faith to compile the final report. She organized all the training violations into a comprehensive document. This goes beyond one bad drill, Sergeant, she said, reviewing the evidence. The pattern suggests systemic issues. Captain Delaney joined us later that evening. Terrence's phone records show calls to 3 other drill sergeants at different bases. We're expanding the investigation. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern. We'd stopped Terrence, but this was clearly just the beginning. What about his threat about making people disappear? I asked. That seemed more ominous than typical drill sergeant intimidation. The captain nodded grimly. We're looking into several recruits who mysteriously washed out after filing complaints. There may be falsified documentation. Colonel Rene called a full briefing the following morning. All company commanders and training staff were required to attend. What happened here represents a complete failure of leadership and oversight, she stated firmly. Every complaint will now be thoroughly investigated. What are the raster? Major Liana announced immediate changes to training protocols. Drill sergeants will be rotated regularly. No single instructor will have prolonged control over any recruit. Lieutenant Parker had been reassigned pending further investigation. Sergeant Quincy was promoted to fill the leadership gap temporarily. 2 weeks later, I met with Colonel Rene for my final debriefing. The investigation had expanded to 3 other military bases. Your undercover work was exceptional, she said. We've already identified 15 other cases of similar abuse. I asked about the recruits who had been targeted before me. Are they being contacted? She nodded. We're reviewing every case where a recruit filed a complaint against Terrence or suddenly washed out under suspicious circumstances. Captain Delaney joined us with the latest update. Terrence's preliminary hearing is scheduled for next month. He's facing multiple charges, including conduct unbecoming and abuse of authority. Faith had compiled a comprehensive report documenting all training violations. The evidence was overwhelming. The pattern shows systematic targeting of recruits who asked questions or showed independent thinking, she explained. They were either broken down or forced out. As I prepared to return to my regular JAG duties, I reflected on the mission. We had exposed not just one abusive drill sergeant, but potentially an entire network of misconduct. Major Liana implemented immediate reforms at Fort Benning. Every drill sergeant would now be evaluated monthly by both superiors and an independent observer. Trevor and Julian both continued their training under better leadership. They would make fine soldiers without being subjected to abuse, disguised as discipline. Colonel Rene's final words stayed with me. This is why the JAG Corps exists, she said, not just to enforce military justice, but to protect the very foundation of what makes our military strong. The investigation continued to expand in the following months. What began with one drill sergeant eventually exposed a culture of abuse that had been allowed to flourish unchecked. Sergeant Terrence's threat about what's really happening here proved prophetic in ways he never intended. His attempt to intimidate me had instead triggered the unraveling of an entire system. The military is built on discipline and respect. What Terrence and others like him had created was neither. It was abuse, masquerading as training, and we had finally put a stop to it.